The morning light filtered through the crystalline walls of the Galactic Crafting Academy, casting rainbow patterns across the workshop floor. Ji-Woo sat at her station in the advanced weaponsmithing classroom, her small human frame dwarfed by the massive workbenches designed to accommodate species of all sizes. Around her, dozens of alien students chittered, hummed, and spoke in their various languages, waiting for class to begin. The Academy was one of the most prestigious institutions in known space. Students came from hundreds of worlds, each bringing their species' unique approach to crafting and creation. Ji-Woo was one of only 3 humans enrolled this cycle, a fact that made her both a curiosity and an outsider. Most students had grown up with advanced technology woven into every aspect of their lives. Their civilizations had mastered space travel thousands of years ago. Humans were newcomers to the galactic community, barely 2 generations into their first contact with alien life. The door shimmered open and Velcros entered. He was a being of living crystal, his body refracting light into geometric patterns that shifted with his movements. As the instructor for advanced weaponsmithing, he commanded respect from every student. His species, the Crystari, were known throughout the galaxy as master craftsmen who could shape matter at the molecular level. "Students," Velcro said, his voice resonating like wind chimes. "Today I will announce your final project for this semester." The classroom fell silent. Final projects at the Academy were legendary. They determined not just grades, but future careers. Companies from across the galaxy recruited based on final project performance. Some students had been preparing for this moment since they first arrived. Velcros moved to the center of the room, his crystalline form catching the light. "You will forge a blade. Not a practice piece. Not a demonstration model. A true weapon worthy of a warrior. You will have access to our forge, our materials, and our equipment." "You have 4 weeks." Excited murmurs rippled through the classroom. Hyan, a Talixian student with 4 powerful arms and skin that shimmered like oil on water, leaned back in his seat with confidence. "Finally, a real challenge," he said loudly enough for others to hear. "I have been planning my design for months." At the next station, Sarah, a Quellan with pale blue skin and enormous dark eyes, was already pulling up holographic displays, calculating measurements and stress points. Her species were natural engineers, able to visualize mathematical concepts as easily as others breathed. She did not speak, but her fingers moved rapidly across the light-based interface running simulations. Other students began discussing their plans immediately. The Vorthian twins started arguing about whether plasma-infused edges were superior to vibroblade technology. A gaseous student named Ithil, who needed a containment suit to maintain form in standard atmosphere, bubbled with enthusiasm about incorporating energy fields into the blade's structure. Ji-Woo sat quietly listening. She watched Velcros move between stations, answering questions about material requisitions and equipment reservations. The other students spoke of molecular restructuring, gravity forging, and quantum sharpening. They discussed alloys she had never heard of and techniques that required technology she barely understood. "Human," Velcros said, suddenly appearing beside her station. His voice was not unkind, but curious. "You are quiet. Do you have questions about the assignment?" Ji-Woo looked up at him. Even seated, the crystalline instructor towered over her. "No, sir. I understand the assignment. And what will you create?" Velcros asked. There was something in his tone, something that suggested he was genuinely interested in her answer. "I am not sure yet," Ji-Woo admitted. "I need to think about it." Eon laughed from his station. "The human needs to think about it," he said mockingly. "Perhaps she does not know how to use our equipment. Should we show her where the forge is?" A few students laughed. Ji-Woo felt her face grow warm, but she did not respond. She had learned early in her time at the academy that reacting to Hyun only encouraged him. He seemed to take pleasure in reminding others, especially her, that humans were the newest and least advanced species in the galactic community. Velcros turned his faceted head toward Hyun. "Every craftsman begins with thought," he said coolly. "Perhaps if you spent more time thinking and less time talking, your work would improve." The laughter stopped. Hyun's skin darkened with embarrassment, a Talixian sign of shame. He said nothing more. Velcros looked back at Ji-Woo. "You have 4 weeks. Use them wisely." Then he moved on to another student. As the class continued, students began reserving forge time and submitting material requests. The academy provided access to almost any substance a student could need. Exotic metals from high-gravity worlds, synthetic diamonds grown in zero-gravity labs, energy crystals that could hold a charge for decades, alloys that could withstand temperatures hot enough to melt rock. Jiwoo pulled up her own terminal and began browsing the available materials. Everything was processed, refined, and expensive. Each item came with detailed specifications about molecular structure, tensile strength, and thermal properties. It was impressive. It was also completely overwhelming. She thought about what she knew of bladesmithing. Before coming to the academy, she had taken a weekend course in blacksmithing back on Earth, making a simple knife from steel. It had been hard work, heating and hammering the metal until her arms ached. The instructor had taught her about carbon content and heat treatment, about the way metal could be folded and shaped. But that was primitive technology compared to what was available here. Around her, students were already designing complex weapons. Hyun's holographic display showed a blade with a gravity-folded edge, each molecule precisely positioned to create an edge only a few atoms wide. Sarah was calculating the perfect curve for a monomolecular cutting surface, a blade so thin it could slice through almost anything. Other students designed weapons with built-in energy fields, self-sharpening edges, and materials that could repair themselves if damaged. Ji-woo closed her terminal. She felt a familiar frustration rising in her chest. This was not the first time she had felt out of place at the academy. While other students had grown up with technology that seemed like magic to her, she had learned to forge metal by hitting it with a hammer. While they calculated molecular bonds, she had learned by feeling the way metal moved under her hands. But maybe that was not a weakness. Maybe that was something else. As class ended and students filed out, still discussing their grand plans, Jiwoo remained seated. She thought about Earth, about human history, about the way her ancestors had survived for thousands of years before they ever had advanced technology. They had not waited for perfect materials or ideal conditions. They had used what was available. They had made weapons from whatever they could find. She stood up and left the classroom, but she did not head toward the forge or the material requisition office. Instead, she walked in the opposite direction, toward the older parts of the academy, the areas most students never visited. She had an idea forming in her mind, something that felt right in a way that molecular restructuring and gravity forging did not. She would not try to compete with the other students using their methods. She would do something different, something human. The next morning, while other students crowded the forge to reserve equipment and claim the best workstations, Jiwoo walked in the opposite direction. She had spent the previous evening thinking about her approach, and she had decided on a plan that would seem strange to anyone watching. She was going to explore the parts of the academy that most students ignored. Her first stop was the Waste Reclamation Center. The facility processed discarded materials from hundreds of labs and workshops across the academy. Most of it was broken equipment, failed experiments, and outdated technology. The center was run by a three-eyed mortal named Cade who seemed surprised to see any student there at all. "You looking for something specific?" Cade asked, his middle eye focusing on her while the other two scanned the rows of sorted waste. "Just looking," Jiwoo said. She walked slowly through the aisles, examining discarded items, broken tools, cracked containers, pieces of unidentifiable machinery. Nothing immediately useful, but she was learning what kinds of materials the academy threw away. She picked up a piece of twisted metal, tested its weight, then set it back down. Cade watched her with curiosity. "Most students only come here when they break something expensive and want to hide the evidence. You are not trying to hide anything, are you?" Jiwoo smiled. "No, I am working on a project. I wanted to see what materials might be available outside the normal requisition system." "Scavenging," Cade said, and his tone was approving. "Smart. My species built our first starships from salvage. There is no shame in using what others discard." Jiwoo thanked him and continued exploring. She did not find what she needed yet, but the visit was not wasted. She had learned something important. While other students thought only about using the newest and best materials, she could think differently. She could look for resources in places they would never consider. Her next stop was the academy kitchens. The facility prepared meals for dozens of species with wildly different dietary needs. The head cook, A broad Kellyan named Tae Min with 6 arms and mottled green skin looked at her suspiciously when she entered. "Students are not allowed in the kitchen," Tae Min said. "If you have a dietary complaint, submit it through the proper channels." "I am not complaining," Jiwoo said quickly. "I wanted to ask about food waste. Specifically bones." Tae Min's suspicion shifted to confusion. "Bones? Some species eat meat, right? What happens to the bones afterward?" Tae Min gestured to a large disposal unit. "They go in there, broken down and recycled." "Why do you ask?" Jiwoo explained she was working on a project and wanted to understand what kinds of biological materials might be available. Tae Min seemed to think this was odd but not concerning. He showed her the disposal system and explained which species' meals produced which kinds of waste. Most of it was useless for her purposes, but she learned that the Academy sometimes served meat from off-world sources, creatures from planets with different gravity and atmospheric conditions. "If you want bones, you should talk to the Xenobiology department," Tae Min suggested. "They have whole skeletons up there. Dead things from all kinds of worlds." Jiwoo's eyes brightened. "Thank you. That is very helpful." She left the kitchen and headed toward the science wing. The Xenobiology department was located on the upper floors, where the windows looked out over the Academy grounds and the alien forest beyond. The labs were quiet, most students having already left for the day. Jiwoo found a directory and looked for someone who might be able to help her. She knocked on a door labeled Dr. Dae-hyun Yoon, Megafauna Specialist. A moment later, the door opened to reveal a human man in his 40s wearing a lab coat covered in dust. His eyes widened in surprise. "Another human," he said in Korean. "I did not know there were any other humans in the science department." Jiwoo responded in the same language, relieved to speak her native tongue. "I am not in the science department. I am a weaponsmithing student. I was hoping you could help me with something." Dae-hyun invited her into his lab. The space was filled with skeletons and bones of every size and description. Some were displayed on stands, others carefully stored in protective cases. A massive skull sat on his workbench, its teeth longer than Jiwoo's forearm. "I study predators from death worlds," Dae-hyun explained, switching back to the common galactic language, planets where life evolved under extreme conditions. "The creatures there develop incredible adaptations. This skull is from a thresher beast of Korvax Prime. The planet has twice standard gravity. Everything there evolved to be stronger, denser, more durable." Jiwoo approached the skull carefully. "Their bones must be incredibly strong." "Stronger than most metals," Dae-hyun confirmed. "Denser than iron but lighter because of the internal structure. Evolution spent millions of years optimizing these creatures for survival." He picked up a smaller bone from his workbench, a femur about the length of Jiwoo's arm. "This is from the same species. I was going to discard it because it is fractured, not useful for display." Jiwoo took the bone carefully. It was heavier than she expected, solid and real in her hands. The surface was smooth, off-white, with subtle ridges and textures. The fracture Dae-hyun mentioned was along one end, exposing the dense internal structure. "Could I have this?" Jiwoo asked. Dae-hyun laughed. "You want a broken bone?" "For what?" "A project," Jiwoo said. "For my weaponsmithing class." The researcher's expression shifted from amusement to interest. "You are going to make a weapon from bone? That is very primitive. Very human, actually." "Is that a yes?" Dae-hyun shrugged. "It is just going to be recycled anyway. Take it. But you must tell me how your project turns out. I am curious now." Jiwoo thanked him and carefully wrapped the bone in cloth before placing it in her bag. As she left the lab, Dae-hyun called after her. "The fracture is actually interesting. Look at how it broke. Natural stress fracture following the grain of the bone. If you understand how the material wants to break, you can understand how it wants to be shaped." She nodded, understanding immediately what he meant. This was different from working with artificial materials that had uniform properties throughout. Bone was organic, variable, shaped by forces she did not fully understand but could learn to work with. Over the next few days, while other students began their projects in the forge, Jiwoo spent her time in the Academy library. She accessed the Human Historical Database, a collection of information that most alien students considered outdated and irrelevant. She read about Paleolithic toolmaking, about how early humans had shaped stone and bone into weapons. She studied Norse and Celtic bone carving techniques. She looked at examples from indigenous peoples across Earth. cultures that had created sophisticated tools from natural materials. Ithil, her roommate, found her there late one evening, surrounded by holographic displays showing ancient human artifacts. "You are researching primitive technology?" Ithil asked, his gaseous form swirling with confusion inside his containment suit. "For an advanced weaponsmithing project?" "It is not primitive," Jiwoo said, not looking up from a diagram of an Inuit bone knife. "It is foundational." These techniques worked for thousands of years. They worked because they understood the materials at a basic level. But we have molecular forges now. We have gravity manipulation. Why use old methods? Jiwoo finally looked at her roommate. "Because everyone else will use the new methods. They will all make the same kinds of weapons, just with small variations. I want to make something different. Something that comes from a different way of thinking." Ithil was quiet for a moment. "The others are saying you do not know how to use the modern equipment. Hyun is telling everyone you are too primitive to understand real crafting." "Let him say what he wants," Jiwoo said. "I will show them what I can do." She turned back to her research. There was a technique she had found in one of the old texts, a method of shaping bone using abrasion rather than cutting. It was slow work, but it allowed the craftsman to follow the natural structure of the material, to reveal the shape hidden inside rather than forcing it into an artificial form. That was what she would do. While the others forced molecules into configurations that nature never intended, she would find the blade that was already waiting inside the bone, shaped by millions of years of evolution on a world more dangerous than most aliens could imagine. She would not try to be better than them at their own methods. She would remind them that humans had learned to be deadly long before they ever had access to advanced technology, and that knowledge, that fundamental understanding of how to make weapons from whatever was available, was something no amount of modern equipment could replace. The forge became a place of wonders over the following weeks. Students worked at stations equipped with technology that would have seemed like magic to humans just a few generations earlier. Molecular assemblers built structures atom by atom. Gravity forges shaped metal under forces that mimicked the cores of planets. Energy fields contained reactions hot enough to vaporize rock. The air hummed with power and possibility. Hyun claimed the largest station naturally. His forearms moved with practiced coordination, manipulating holographic controls while machines around him shaped his chosen material. He had selected a titanium tungsten alloy, mixed with traces of exotic elements from a high-gravity world. The metal floated in a containment field while gravity manipulators folded it repeatedly at the molecular level, creating layers so thin that thousands of them fit in the width of a single hair. 17,000 layers so far, Hyun announced to anyone who would listen. "By the time I finish, the edge will be only a few molecules wide. It will cut through anything." At her station, Sarah worked in near silence. She had built a clean room around her workspace, a sterile environment where not even a single dust particle could interfere with her process. Through the transparent walls, other students could see her carefully constructing a blade using quantum-locked carbon lattices. Each atom was positioned with mathematical precision, creating a structure that existed at the edge of physical possibility. The Vorthian twins had combined their efforts to create a plasma-edged sword that glowed with contained fury. A Quellan student named Jinho was growing crystalline structures that would form a blade sharper than anything found in nature. Even Ithil, despite being a gaseous being, was designing a weapon that used shaped force fields to contain and direct energy. And in the corner, in a small space she had claimed far from the main forge, Jiwoo worked with tools that looked ancient compared to everything around her. She had brought her bone to the workshop and cleared a simple bench. No holographic displays, no molecular assemblers, just hand tools, abrasive stones, and a basic grinding wheel that most students did not even know the academy owned. She had found it in a storage room covered in dust, a relic from an earlier era of the academy's history. The first step was understanding the bone itself. Jiwoo examined it carefully, running her fingers along the surface, feeling the subtle variations in texture and density. The fracture at one end showed the internal structure, revealing how the bone had grown in layers over the creature's life. She could see the grain, the direction in which the bone was strongest. She marked where she would cut, following the natural lines rather than imposing an artificial shape. Then, slowly, carefully, she began to work. The sound of her grinding wheel was different from the hum of the molecular forges. It was rougher, more physical. Scrape, scrape, scrape. The bone dust fell away in small curls as she shaped the material. Other students occasionally glanced her way with expressions ranging from confusion to pity. They did not understand what she was doing or why she would choose such primitive methods. "Is the human actually making something with hand tools?" she heard someone whisper. "Maybe she does not have the credits to requisition better materials," another voice suggested. "Or maybe she is just too stupid to use the real equipment," Hyun said loudly enough for Jiwoo to hear. He did not look at her directly, but she knew the comment was meant for her. Jiwoo did not respond. She had learned long ago that the best response to mockery was results. She kept working, letting the rhythm of the grinding wheel calm her mind. This was familiar work, even if the material was alien. The principles were the same. Understand the material. Work with its nature, not against it. Let the tool do its job while the craftsman guides it. Velcros made his rounds through the forge, observing each student's progress. He spent long minutes at Hyun's station, his crystalline form refracting the light from the containment field. He examined Sarah's quantum lattice construction with what seemed like approval. He asked questions, offered suggestions, and generally supervised the sophisticated work being done. When he reached Jiwoo's corner, he stood silently for several minutes, watching her work. She did not stop or acknowledge him at first, focused on smoothing a particular curve in the blade. Finally, she paused and looked up. "Primitive methods," Velcros observed. His tone was neutral, neither approving nor critical. "Simple methods," Jiwoo corrected gently. "Not the same thing. Explain the difference." Jiwoo set down her grinding stone and picked up the partially shaped bone. "Primitive means outdated, inferior. Simple means foundational, clear. What I am doing is simple. I am removing material until what remains is what I need. No complicated processes, no advanced technology, just understanding the material and shaping it appropriately." Velcros tilted his head, light scattering from his faceted surface. "And you believe this approach will produce a weapon comparable to what your classmates are creating?" "I believe it will produce a weapon that works," Jiwoo said. "Whether it is comparable depends on how you measure." The instructor seemed to consider this. "Your classmates are creating blades with properties that exceed natural materials by several orders of magnitude. Hyun's edge will be sharper than anything found in nature. Sarah's molecular structure will be perfectly uniform. How do you compete with that?" Jiwoo looked at the bone in her hands. "I do not compete with it. I do something different. This bone comes from a creature that evolved on a world more dangerous than almost anywhere in the galaxy. The bone is not uniform because the creature's life was not uniform. It grew stronger where it needed strength, more flexible where it needed flexibility. Millions of years of evolution shaped this material. I am not trying to improve on that. I am trying to reveal it." Velcros was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something Jiwoo did not expect. "I have taught at this academy for 23 cycles. I have seen thousands of students create thousands of blades. Most of them understand technology but do not understand craft. They believe that better tools make better work. But the greatest craftsman in galactic history understood what you seem to understand. The tool does not make the craftsman. The craftsman must know the material so completely that the tool becomes merely an extension of their understanding." He turned to leave, then paused. "Continue your work. I am interested to see the result." After he left, Jiwoo returned to her grinding wheel. Around her, the forge continued its symphony of advanced technology. But in her corner, there was only the steady scrape of stone against bone, the oldest sound of human craft unchanged across thousands of years. She worked for hours each day, taking breaks only when her arms grew too tired to continue safely. The blade began to take shape. It was not symmetrical like the other weapons being created. It followed the natural curve of the bone, which gave it an unusual profile. The edge was not perfectly straight but had a slight wave to it, following the grain of the material. She created the handle by carefully grinding a groove and wrapping it with synthetic fiber she had salvaged from the waste reclamation center. The wrapping technique was based on traditional Japanese sword-making methods, creating a grip that would not slip even when wet. She tested the balance repeatedly, removing tiny amounts of material from different points until the weapon felt like an extension of her arm. As the deadline approached, the other students began finishing their projects. Hyun's gravity-folded blade gleamed like captured starlight, its edge invisible to the naked eye. Sarah's quantum lattice weapon looked like it was made from frozen light, perfectly transparent and impossibly sharp. The other creations were equally impressive, each one a masterwork of modern technology and alien ingenuity. Jiwoo's bone blade looked crude by comparison. There were visible tool marks on the surface where she had not bothered to polish them away completely. The edge, while sharp, was not uniform. The handle wrapping was practical rather than decorative. It looked like something that might have been made 10,000 years ago by someone sitting around a campfire, shaping tools for survival. But it was finished. And more importantly, Jiwoo knew exactly how it would behave. She knew every curve, every density variation, every subtle characteristic of the material. The blade was not separate from her. It was not a piece of technology she had assembled. It was something she had revealed, and in the process of revealing it, she had learned its nature completely. On the final day before presentations, Hyun walked past her station and laughed. "You really made a weapon from a piece of garbage," he said. "I almost admire the stubbornness. It will be interesting to see how quickly it breaks during testing." Jiwoo ran her thumb along the bone blade's edge, feeling the sharpness. "We will see," she said quietly. "We will see." Demonstration day arrived with clear skies visible through the academy's transparent ceiling. The testing arena had been prepared, a large open space with equipment and measurement devices arranged in careful order. Velcro stood at the center while students gathered in a semicircle, each one holding the weapon they had created. Faculty members from other departments had come to observe. This was always one of the Academy's most anticipated events. "Each of you will present your blade," Velcro announced. "You will explain your design, demonstrate its capabilities, and subject it to our standard tests. These tests will measure cutting efficiency, structural integrity, and combat effectiveness. The measurements are objective. The blade either performs or it does not." He gestured to the testing stations. 3 areas had been set up. The first contained various materials to test cutting ability: synthetic flesh that mimicked living tissue, ballistic gel designed to simulate muscle and organ density, and composite armor plating used in military applications. The second area had equipment to measure structural properties, stress tests, impact resistance, and material fatigue. The third was a combat simulation chamber where a training drone would engage each weapon. "We will proceed in the order you submitted your material requisitions," Velcro said. "Ion, you are first." Hyun stepped forward confidently, his forearms carrying his gravity-folded blade. Even in the arena's bright light, the edge was nearly invisible, the molecular structure so refined that it seemed to cut through the air itself. He held it up for everyone to see. "I have created a blade with 17,000 molecular layers," Hyun explained. "Each layer is precisely aligned using gravity manipulation. The edge is exactly 7 molecules wide, making it one of the sharpest possible using known physics. The titanium tungsten core provides strength, while the exotic element coating prevents oxidation and wear." He approached the cutting test station. The synthetic flesh separated before the blade even seemed to touch it, falling apart in clean sections. The ballistic gel offered no resistance, the blade passing through as if nothing was there. Even the composite armor designed to stop high-velocity projectiles split cleanly under a single strike. The structural tests were equally impressive. The blade withstood enormous pressure without bending or showing stress. Impact tests that would have shattered conventional materials left it unmarked. The measuring equipment registered values that made several faculty members murmur with approval. Then came the combat simulation. The training drone activated, a sphere about the size of a human head that floated on anti-gravity fields. It was equipped with sensors, defensive fields, and sophisticated AI to test combat application. Hyun engaged it smoothly, demonstrating precise strikes and defensive maneuvers. The drone's sensors flashed red repeatedly, indicating hits that would have been lethal against a living opponent. When Hyun finished, he bowed to polite applause from the watching students. Several faculty members made notes on their tablets. It was an excellent demonstration, exactly what everyone expected from the Academy's top student. Sarah went next. Her quantum lattice blade performed similarly well, its monomolecular edge cutting through test materials at the atomic level. The combat simulation was more technical than Hyun's, demonstrating perfect control and precision rather than aggressive striking. Her blade was clearly the work of someone who understood both physics and craft at the highest level. Other students followed, each one demonstrating weapons that represented the cutting edge of galactic technology, Jin-Ho's crystalline blade shattered the ballistic gel into perfect cubes. The Vorthian twins' plasma sword carved through the armor plating like it was paper. Ithil's energy weapon, despite being created by a gaseous being, performed with remarkable efficiency. Then Velcros called Ji-Woo's name. The arena grew quieter. Students shifted to get a better view. Ji-Woo walked forward holding her bone blade. Under the arena lights, it looked even more primitive than it had in the workshop. The bone's natural color was off-white, almost yellow in places. The surface showed subtle imperfections, the marks of hand tools and natural variation. Compared to the gleaming technological marvels that had been demonstrated, it looked like something from a museum of ancient history. She heard whispers. Someone laughed quietly. Hyun's expression was smug, confident that the human was about to embarrass herself. "Explain your weapon," Velcro said, his tone neutral. Ji-Woo held up the blade. "This is made from the femur of a thresher beast from Korvax Prime. The creature evolved on a death world with twice standard gravity. Its bones are denser than iron but lighter due to internal structure. I shaped it using abrasive techniques to follow the natural grain of the bone. The handle is wrapped with synthetic fiber using a grip technique that is over 1,000 years old on my world." "Why did you choose this approach?" Velcros asked. "Because the material was already optimized by millions of years of evolution. I did not try to improve it. I tried to reveal the weapon that was already there." Velcros gestured toward the testing stations. "Proceed." Ji-Woo approached the cutting test area. She could feel dozens of eyes watching her, waiting to see her fail. She positioned herself in front of the synthetic flesh and took a breath. Then she struck. The blade cut through the synthetic flesh smoothly. Not as effortlessly as Hyun's molecular edge, but cleanly and efficiently. The ballistic gel parted under her strikes, the bone blade leaving clear channels through the material. When she reached the composite armor plating, she paused. This was the real test. Several students had needed multiple strikes to penetrate the armor. Some of the lighter blades had failed entirely. Ji-Woo examined the armor plate looking for the weakest point. Then she struck, putting her weight behind the blade and aiming for the material's natural weakness. There was a sharp crack. The armor fractured. Not a clean cut, but a significant structural failure. The bone blade had not broken through completely, but it had done something perhaps more impressive. It had damaged military-grade armor that was designed to stop much more advanced weapons. More importantly, when Ji-Woo lifted her blade to examine it, there was no damage. The bone had held. The structural integrity tests came next. The measuring equipment registered the bone's properties. It was not as uniformly strong as the artificial materials. There were variations, points where the density changed. But when stress was applied, the blade did something the others had not done. It flexed slightly. "The bone is absorbing impact rather than resisting it," one of the faculty observers noted aloud. "Fascinating. It is behaving like organic material, distributing force through its structure." The measurements were not as impressive as Hyun's or Sarah's. The bone blade could not match the raw numbers of advanced materials, but it also did not fail where other materials would have shattered. It bent, absorbed, and returned to shape. Like the creature it came from, it had evolved to survive damage rather than prevent it. Then came the combat simulation. The drone activated its sensors focusing on Ji-Woo. This was where many students expected her to fail entirely. Combat effectiveness required not just a good weapon, but skill in using it. Many students had created excellent blades but performed poorly in the simulation because they did not truly understand combat. Ji-Woo held the bone blade in a ready position, her grip relaxed but firm. The drone began its attack pattern, moving in the standard sequence used to test defensive capability. It was expecting her to respond like the other students had, with careful technique and measured strikes. She did not fight that way. Ji-Woo moved like someone who understood that weapons were not tools of elegance but instruments of survival. Her strikes were efficient, targeting the drone's sensor clusters and joint points. When the drone adapted its pattern, she adapted faster, using feints and misdirection. She did not try to overpower it. She found weaknesses and exploited them. The bone blade moved through the air with a different sound than the metal weapons. It was duller, harder to track. Where metal would ring against the drone's plating, bone produced a heavy thud that the sensors seemed less equipped to anticipate. Ji-Woo used the blade's natural curve to hook around the drone's defenses, striking from angles the AI had not been programmed to expect. She struck from below, spinning and using her whole body to generate force. The bone blade caught the drone's lower sensor array and yanked it downward. Before it could compensate, she reversed her grip and struck again at an exposed joint. The drone's sensors flashed red. Critical hit registered. The drone attempted to create distance, but Jiwoo pressed forward. She did not give it space to reset. Another strike, another critical hit registered. The drone's movements became erratic as its AI tried to cope with an attack pattern it had not encountered before. Most students treated the simulation like a formal duel. Jiwoo treated it like a fight for survival. Final strike. The drone's sensors went dark. Combat simulation complete. Jiwoo stepped back, breathing hard but steady. The arena was completely silent. Then the display screen updated with her results. Cutting efficiency, 87%. Structural integrity, 79%. Combat effectiveness, 94%. The combat score was higher than anyone else's, including Hyun's. Several faculty members immediately began discussing the results. How had a primitive weapon achieved a better combat rating than molecular engineered Bull? The applause was scattered at first, uncertain. Then more students joined, and soon the arena echoed with the sound. Jiwoo stood holding her bone blade, surprised by the reaction. She had expected respect, perhaps, or acknowledgement. But this felt like something more. Hyun was not applauding. His forearms were crossed, his expression dark with frustration. He had scored high in every category. His blade had performed perfectly. And yet the human with her primitive bone weapon had achieved a better combat rating. It did not make sense to him. How could inferior technology produce superior results? Velcros raised one crystalline arm and the applause gradually faded. Before we conclude today's demonstrations, I would like to discuss what we have witnessed. He moved to the center of the arena, light refracting through his body. Each of you has created an impressive weapon. You have shown mastery of advanced techniques and sophisticated technology, but I want you to think carefully about what Jiwoo's demonstration revealed. The instructor turned to face the assembled students. What is the purpose of a weapon? To fight, someone called out. To win combat, another student suggested. To kill efficiently, Hyun said, his tone challenging. Velcros nodded. All reasonable answers. A weapon exists to give advantage in conflict. But here's the important question. What makes a weapon effective? Is it the sharpness of the edge? The strength of the material? The sophistication of the technology? He gestured toward the displayed test results. By most measurements, Hyun's blade is objectively superior to Jiwoo's. It is sharper, stronger, more precisely manufactured. Sarah's quantum lattice weapon has properties that approach physical limits. The other weapons demonstrated today represent the pinnacle of what our current understanding of materials and forces can achieve, and yet in combat simulation, the bone blade achieved the highest effectiveness rating. Why the arena was quiet. Students looked at each other, uncertain how to answer. This was supposed to be a technical course, a class about crafting and materials science. Velcros was asking them to think about something deeper. I can answer that, Jiwoo said quietly. Velcros turned to her. Please share your thoughts. Jiwoo stepped forward, still holding her blade. A weapon is only as effective as the person using it. All the advanced technology in the galaxy does not matter if the wielder does not understand their weapon completely. I know this blade. I know every curve, every density variation, every characteristic. I know how it feels in my hand, how it moves through air, how it responds to force. That knowledge cannot be measured by your equipment, but it is real. She pointed to Hyun's blade. Your weapon is sharper than mine. It is stronger, more advanced, more impressive. But do you know it the way I know mine? Did you feel every molecule as it was positioned by your machines? Do you understand its balance so completely that it feels like part of your body? Hyun's skin darkened slightly, but he said nothing. Velcro spoke again. This is the lesson I hoped you would learn this semester. Technology is a tool, but craft is understanding. You can have the most advanced forge in the galaxy, but if you do not understand the fundamental principles of what you are creating, you're only an operator of machines, not a true craftsman. He moved toward Jiwoo's testing station, examining the bone blade more closely. Humans are a very young species in galactic terms. Most of you come from civilizations that achieved space travel thousands or tens of thousands of years ago. You grew up with technology so advanced it seems like natural law. But humans are different. They are recent enough to still remember what it was like to survive without technology. Velcros turned to address all the students. Do you know how humans first left their home planet? Their initial rockets were barely controlled explosions. They had computers less powerful than your personal communication devices. By our standards, their technology was laughably primitive, and yet they succeeded because they understood something fundamental. When you do not have perfect technology, you must have perfect understanding of what you do have. He picked up Jiwoo's blade carefully, examining the bone in the light. This weapon was created using techniques that are thousands of years old. Humans learned to shape bone and stone long before they understood molecular structure or quantum mechanics. They learned by doing, by failing, by trying again. Every human weapon carries that history, that accumulated knowledge of survival. Velcro set the blade down gently. I asked Jiwoo earlier why she chose this approach. She said the material was already optimized by millions of years of evolution, and she only needed to reveal what was there. This is wisdom. This is understanding that no amount of technology can replace. She did not try to improve on nature. She worked with it. A student raised their hand. But instructor, surely our advanced methods are superior. We can create materials stronger than anything nature produces. Can you? Velcros asked. Or can you create materials with higher numbers in specific categories? Strength, sharpness, durability. These are measurements we have chosen, but nature optimizes for survival, which includes factors we cannot easily measure. Flexibility, reliability, repairability, availability of resources. Jiwoo's blade may not have the highest numbers, but it achieved the highest combat effectiveness because she understood all these factors. He turned back to Jiwoo. Tell them what happens when your blade breaks. Jiwoo looked at the bone in her hands. Then I find another bone, or a piece of metal, or a rock, or I use my hands. Humans do not stop fighting because we lost our weapon. We find another way. We always find another way. And that, Velcro said, is what makes humans dangerous. Not your technology, which is still far behind most galactic civilizations. Not your physical strength, which many species exceed. But your refusal to accept that you are beaten. Your ability to see weapons in everything around you. Your knowledge carried in cultural memory of how to survive with nothing but your intelligence and determination. The crystalline instructor's voice took on a different quality, something almost like respect. Every species here has advantages. The Talixians have 4 arms and incredible physical coordination. The Quellans have mathematical minds that can calculate molecular bonds instinctively. The Crystari, my own people, can shape matter at scales you cannot perceive. But humans have something else. They have the memory of being weak, of being prey, of having to fight for survival against creatures stronger and faster than themselves, and they have never forgotten it. Jan spoke up, his voice strained. So we should abandon our technology? Go back to making weapons from bones and stones? No, Velcro said firmly. You should understand that technology is a tool, not a replacement for knowledge. Jiwoo did not reject technology. She used what was appropriate for her purpose. She made a choice based on understanding rather than assumption. That is wisdom. He addressed the entire class now. You will all receive your final grades based on multiple factors: technical execution, innovation, and practical effectiveness. But I want you to remember today's lesson. The best weapon is not the one with the highest specifications. It is the one the wielder trusts absolutely. And that trust comes from understanding, not from numbers on a display screen. Velcros turned to Jiwoo one final time. You have earned the highest marks in this class. Not just for your combat score, but for demonstrating the principle I have been trying to teach all semester. You understood your material, your purpose, and yourself. That is craft. The instructor dismissed the class and students began filing out of the arena. Some approached Jiwoo to congratulate her or examine her bone blade more closely. Others left quietly, thinking about what they had seen and heard. The Vorthian twins asked if she would teach them about human weapon-making techniques. Jin-Ho wanted to know more about working with organic materials. Hyun approached last. He stood for a moment, clearly struggling with what to say. Finally, he spoke. I do not like that you won. I still think my blade is technically superior. He paused. But I understand now that technical superiority is not everything. If we were stranded on a hostile planet with no technology, no forge, no equipment, you would survive. I would not know what to do. Jiwoo met his gaze. Then maybe we should not be enemies. Maybe you could learn from my approach and I could learn from yours. We would both be better craftsmen. Jan considered this, then nodded slowly. Perhaps. That is worth thinking about. He turned and left without another word, but his posture was different. Less arrogant, more thoughtful. Ithil floated over, his gaseous form swirling with excitement inside his containment suit. That was amazing. Will you really teach us about human techniques? I want to learn how to fight like that. Jiwoo smiled. Fighting is not just about technique. It is about mindset. But yes, I can teach you what I know. As the arena emptied, Jiwoo stayed behind for a moment, looking at her bone blade. It was scarred now from the testing, small marks and scratches that told the story of what it had endured. But it was intact. It had performed exactly as she had understood it would. And in doing so, it had taught a lesson that went beyond weapon making. Humans had survived for thousands of years with nothing but their intelligence and their refusal to give up. That